In this video, I'm going to go through doing a search for some of the academic journals that you need to find throughout the course. I'll be doing this throughout the semester. I'm going to do it in relation to your first discussion here. Remember, your first discussion is asking you to look at one of these techniques and find an article where it's being used as a genetic tool to monitor populations. It gives you a couple of links here. It gives you Unity's online library and Google Scholar. First, we'll do it through Unity's online library. Now, you can also do it over here in library resources. So in future assignments, if you don't see this link, you can do it through this link in Canvas with library resources. Let's click on Unity's online library, and I'm going to do next generation sequencing, and I'm going to also put conservation because I want to narrow it to just using next gen sequencing in conservation biology, not in every other discipline. And I'm going to hit search. Now, a couple of things that we see over here, we can limit it. We can limit it to things that Unity has, and we also can limit it here to academic peer-reviewed journals. Remember, that's what you're going to need to find. So I can click that box if it's asking you to find something within certain dates. So let's say one of your assignments asks you to find something that's been published in the last couple of years, you can limit your search to those areas. Now, one of the things that we want to take a look at here is we can see that each one of these is an academic journal. Let me unclick that for a second. Notice this first one, when I unclicked it, this is a news article. It's in an academic journal, but it is not a peer-reviewed article. So if you see something that is news or a review, you don't want that. You want a research article. We're going to come back and look at academic peer-reviewed, and then we can also limit it to, say, academic journals. And then we can scroll through our findings. One of the things we will typically want to do is to make sure that we can get the full text. If you can't get full text of something, you really don't want to use it because then all you're really seeing is the abstract. If I click on the linked full text, it should pull up that article for me. And I can see that this is an original article. Now, one of the other things that you can typically tell, it's going to be a research article if you see a methods section and you actually see data in there and data analysis. So if you don't see a methods and data analysis section, you're probably looking at either a commentary, a news article, or a review article. And in this case, it's asking you to use a research article because it's asking you about their methods and about their findings, which you're not going to find in a news, commentary, or review article. Now let's go back to the discussion and also see what we can do through Google Scholar, because Google Scholar is actually pretty good. So we can hit Google Scholar, we can do next generation sequencing, and then I can also add in here conservation, search, and I can look for a date range since 2023. And on this one, you're going to have to be a little bit more careful because it doesn't really tell me which ones are review and which ones are research articles, but I can tell right here this is a review article. And then when I click in it, I can always tell if it's a research article. Now, you can do an advanced search in Google Scholar where you can put in other words and you can ask where it should look for that. If you're looking for a particular author, you can do that. Unfortunately, in here, I also don't see where you can specifically select for a research article. So this is going to be a little bit harder. You're going to have to look at the article to see if it's a research article or not. You definitely want an article that's in a journal, like we saw here. This is an original article. It's in a journal called Evolutionary Applications. It's peer-reviewed. Let me also mention about citations. You want to make sure that you cite this particular article. The best way to do that, well, there's a couple of ways. One is you can look at the PDF, and the PDF will typically give you the information you need. Let's take a look at what this citation would look like. I would put in all of the authors, and typically what we try to do is we would put in Montero BK, Reffley E, comma, and I'm not going to complete it. You would put in all of the other authors there, okay? Include names of all authors, and then at the end of that, you would put the date. Remember, when we scrolled down to the bottom, the year was 2019. You would put in the name of the article just as it's listed here. So challenges of next generation sequencing. And again, I'm not going to write it all in, but you would finish the name of that article. At the end of it, you would have a period, and then you would have the name of the journal, which was Evolutionary Applications. You would have the volume 12. If there's an issue like it shows over here, you put that in parentheses, then you put a colon, and then you put the page numbers. So our page numbers here were 425 to 442, period. And you can put the DOI if you want to, put that there. So again, in your references section, at the end of your essay, you would put it like this, including all names of authors and the full title of the article. Now, when you're using information from this article in your essay, what you would do is, let's say you have a sentence where you're saying Montero et al., period, 2019, show that, and then whatever information you get from them. So that's your in-text citation, which is in your essay. And then at the end, you would have the full citation where someone could actually go and find it. And you want to always include both. And when you're using this in-text citation, again, you want to identify where you've used specific information from that article. Another resource that I want to share with you is the Unity Com Hub. So this is the link here. So when you come in here to the Unity Communications Hub, you'll see a lot of different things down here. Use of generative AI, which I strongly encourage you to look at if you are using any sort of generative AI or AI correcting app when you're doing your writing. And then also this one over here, working with source information. This is what I want to point out here. So it talks a little bit about finding credible sources, what they are, how to find them, and then also citing your sources. And that does go into how to conduct searches as well. Let's go into citing sources. So let's take a look at why do we cite sources. We're citing sources because, one, you want to make your work credible. So you want to say, I am giving you this information that I got from this other source, which is a respected journal that I got it from. You're giving credit for the person who did the work, which is very important too. So we want to give credit. We want to make it so that that person can check the information you're putting in there, not just believing you because you put a citation in. If I want to go and check that citation, I can, because you are giving me an in-text citation where you used information from that source, and then at the end you're giving me the full citation so I can go and find that source. When we do a citation, what we are trying to do is to give credit for originality, either of data or of a particular idea. So one of the things you want to be careful of is providing a citation for somebody that you know did not necessarily first come up with this idea. If you're talking about viruses first being shown to cause disease and you're giving me a citation that's happening in 2004, I know that that's inaccurate, right? I know that we've known that way before 2004. So you want to be careful how you attribute that information. You're trying to give credit the person who originally came up with that idea. If you are trying to give a definition, you might find it very difficult to track down who actually came up with that. And it's okay to use basic information. You're in a science course, so you can assume that some basic information is known. So you don't have to just give me a definition of what a cell is or what a population is. Some of that we understand, that we've gotten to the point where we all know what that means. But if you're getting into something that you don't necessarily know off the top of your head, then you're going to want to put in some of that citation. You're going to need to have all of this information in here. So you're going to have the author, the title of the work, whether it's an article in a journal or a book. You're going to give the date of the publication. Typically, we're only going to put in the year of the publication. If it's something like a news story, that's when you start seeing month and day, but typically you don't see that in most references. What is the source of it? So what is the name of the journal? What is the publisher of the book? And then you're also going to include a volume and issue number if it's a journal, and also page numbers. And you can include a URL or a DOI. However, when you're doing a journal citation, you also want to include all of that other information. So that's just in addition to, here's the author's name, Smith, and then their first initials only, the year. This is the title of the article. Notice that each word is not capitalized. We did capitalize the first one there, and we capitalized Amazon because that's a proper noun. But otherwise, you do not capitalize each word of the article title. You do capitalize each word of the journal title. This is the journal here. So this is the Journal of Insect Biology. This is the volume, 83. In parentheses here, we have the issue, and then these are the page numbers. Notice we don't have the word volume written in there. We don't have the word pages written in there. We just put them in this format, and everybody knows, if you know APA 7 format, that that's what you're looking at. If you do have a URL or a DOI, you can put that here. But again, you don't want to just put that and leave this other information out. It's actually okay to put this information here, the volume, pages, etc., and leave the URL off. It's not okay to do it the other way. That would be what your end citation would look like in your reference section. This is another example. Here we have authors, the year, the name of the article. This is the journal as Oikos. This is the volume, 120, and then pages 321 to 326. So for this one, maybe there weren't separate issues in that volume. For the in-text citation, where you use information from this article, at the end of that sentence before the period, you're going to have in parentheses the author's name. If it's 3 or more, you're going to use this et al. So you just use the first author here and et al. Noticed up here, we listed all the authors. In your end citation, you list them all. But in your in-text citation, if it's 2, you would list both of the last names. But if it's 3 or more, you just put et al. There. Now, another way to do this is if you wrote the sentence that said Allerton et al. Showed that, and you used this name in your sentence, then what you would have up here is you'd say Allerton et al. In parentheses, the 2011, and then you would finish your sentence. But you wouldn't also then include it at the end. So you can include it as part of your actual sentence, or you can include it at the end of the sentence. You don't do both. And notice what they're citing here. They haven't put it in quotation marks because they're paraphrasing, but they are giving me something that this particular author first published in their study, showing that 90% of the tropical plant species are animal pollinated. So these authors are the first ones to report this particular piece of evidence. As it says here, you don't necessarily want to use directly quoted material. In scientific writing, we typically use quotes very sparingly. If you pick up a typical scientific journal, you're not going to see a lot of quotes in it, very few. So you need to learn how to paraphrase because that's what is expected in science. In addition, even if you do quote, Unity has a policy that 15% or less of the material is allowed to be quoted. So you may not use quotes around more than 15%. And when you're doing that percentage calculation, just like when you're doing a word count, you do not include the reference section. So take only the part you've written, not the references, count up how many words are in it, and then go back and see how much you have quoted if you've got anything quoted, and make sure that it's 15% or less of that written material. If you do a direct quote, that's when you actually put in a page number. So normally you would not see a page number here, you would just see Mojado 2015, but if you are doing a direct quote, then you would use a page number. One of the things that it mentions here, which is very helpful, is if you are looking at a source on Google Scholar, you can get the full citation very easily. I can show you that. Here we see a paper on this, and if I go right here and say cite, it will show me the different formats. So right here is the appropriate APA style format for this article. So notice these are our authors, the year, the title of the article, the title of the journal, this is the volume, that's the issue, and these are the pages. So if you find your article in Google Scholar, you can very easily find that reference. Another thing that is very important is that when you use that in-text citation, make sure you are doing it correctly. This is very important that we give credit to the people that came up with the ideas or the data. And so just sort of randomly sticking an in-text citation someplace where it doesn't really belong is considered academic dishonesty. So you want to make sure that where you are putting it in your text really does go with the article you are attributing it to. Please make sure you check all of that as well. For the first week assignments, if this is not done correctly, you will receive a 0 and then you will have an opportunity to fix it. After the first week, if it's not done correctly, you will receive the 0s. You will not have the ability to fix it. If it's done incorrectly, it is also Unity's policy that we are to report that as an academic integrity violation. So please be very clear, and if you have any questions on how to do any of this, you please contact me.